and welcome to Tinted Specs podcast. I'm Georgina, and joining me today is Gregory French, founder of Atlas Accessories and a wolf behavior specialist. Welcome, Gregory.
Hey, Georgina, nice to be here.
Well, I really want to talk to you about both these things that you have been labelled as. So why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and tell them a bit about yourself and a bit about Atlas Accessories and being a wolf behavior specialist.
Okay, well, I'm originally from America, which most people can tell by the accent. Moved over here in '89 and just fell in love with the UK and pretty much then got my passport for convenience purposes, but just have kind of stayed here ever since, even went away for a little bit, but came back. Atlas Accessories is basically sort of a culmination of everything I've done in my life. Used to be in investment banking, and then I was in startups, and this was sort of after building a lot of companies for a lot of people, I kind of wanted to do something for myself. And funny enough, it became jewelry, which was interesting. It was not something I had expected. And the wolf behaviorist thing is I've always had a passion for animals, and I've always worked with rescues in terms of saving Canadian geese from oil spills when I was 15 or whatever it was. And I seem to have a particular connection with wolves, and worked with a lot of conservation groups that had rescues that were socialized but could never be re-released, and we were responsible for looking after them. So the wolf thing is something that's very close to me. I've also worked with tigers and stuff like that before. So yeah.
I have to say it's a strong theme, animals, in Atlas Accessories and in what you've done before as well, because you have a clear love of animals, the world, sustainability, ethics, all of those kinds of things. So tell us a bit, we'll come back to the wolf and tigers, very excited, a bit later, but tell us a little bit about Atlas Accessories. I know that Atlas was the name of your dog as well. So tell us a bit about that.
So Atlas Accessories got started because at 55, I decided I wanted to do something for myself. And I've always been a huge believer in retail therapy. It's a great way to, think. And I had these kind of designs on my wrist that were cobbled together, and they had meaning, but I didn't really have the right materials and stuff. And I'm not a jewelry maker, so I basically just had thrown together a few things. And so I decided to really, for myself, like, okay, well, I'm thinking, why don't I make these into actual proper pieces of jewelry? Just a little bit of fun for myself. So I found this young woman who was a master craftsperson, and we started working on these, and we made the prototypes. And then people started asking me where they could buy them. And it was very much by happenstance. I thought, okay, that's interesting. So we started looking at making these, and I sold a few. And when I thought of naming the company, the whole concept behind the accessories is meaning and symbolism, and the materials, all have animal symbolism or, stone symbolism or what have you. And so I wanted the name of the company to embody that. And the more I thought about it, I had this dog called Atlas. He was pretty much, my best friend, the most important thing in my life. And like in any culture, they say if you call out the name of a divinity or an entity or what have you, whether it's Ganesh or, Christ or what have you, it's calling on that benevolence or that spirit in some way or that energy. And so in calling it Atlas Accessories, when I talk about the company every day, which is a lot all the time, I'm constantly calling on the name Atlas, which is the single greatest memory I've ever had in my life and the greatest experience. So the name had to mean something the way the jewelry means something. So I called it Atlas.
Yeah. And I know when you originally named your dog Atlas, it was because it felt like he was lifting the world off your shoulders. He kind of gave you like a big relief. And he was a big dog as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a Ridgeback Mastiff cross rescue that I had found in California when I was living there. And basically when I got him, it was just that, connection. It was clearly, he was 3 months old. We got on perfectly. And I actually, for a couple of weeks, I hadn't named him. And I was thinking, okay, what do I want to name this? And life at the time was just crazy. I had people yelling and, just life was just upside down. And when I got him, that first 2 weeks, all of a sudden it's like there was a calmness. Like I didn't care about anything. Nothing bothered me. Like all of that was Teflon. Nothing was going to touch me. And it's like he lifted the weight of the world off my shoulders. And so I called him Atlas. And
Yeah.
like the guy who holds up the world, he got named Atlas. So that's how he got his name.
Oh, I think that's so beautiful. And I think it's such a nice thing to call the jewelry company Atlas Accessories as well, because like you say, every time you say his name, you're kind of and you're remembering him basically, and what he meant to you, and the whole symbolism. So this week you had a review, and I came to have a quick look and a chat with you, and I was really blown away about what you talked about, kind of the sustainability and ethics side of it. And that goes to the stones, but also the leather, and also you have a vegan plant fiber as well. Do you want to tell people a bit more about the leather, because that really blew me away?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes back to the way I design. But I've always been a fan of leather, and the most frustrating thing in the world is to buy something that, because you're on vacation, you find this cool leather bracelet or something, and within a year, if you're wearing it in the shower or swimming or surfing or whatever, it degrades and it falls off. And that was always just like, you bought it for a special purpose and then it just disappears, and that was always frustrating. So when I started to make these, I was thinking about, how do I do this? And one of the first designs I made, which was the Aeon.
Oh yeah, show us.
Let's see if we can do this here. This one here with the square.
Amber.
Yeah, the amber right there. That's bison leather. And that was basically, that design was created when my ex-partner and I put a love lock on a bridge in Poland. And basically, he's Polish and I was American. So the idea was to take American bison and bind it with a knot to the Polish amber, which represented that commitment. So that design represents an eternal commitment to something. And when I found out about bison, I thought, okay, this is amazing, because not only is it not cow, which is, there's a big conversation around cows, and bison actually is being rewilded in America and replacing cows, and they're more environmentally friendly and sustainable. And they were the original kind of resource for Native American tribes, and they were incredibly abundant. And the hides were chosen for a reason, because they are naturally designed, like by nature, to be elastic and water resistant and durable over time. So I wanted to create, jewelry or leather jewelry that lasted, not that fell off in a year, because that goes to the conversation of disposability. And these hides, also not being cow, these are tribal hides that have been used for thousands of years. They've been sustainable on that basis. So part of sustainability is about overconsumption, and we make everything by hand. We're never going to produce a million of anything. So these tribal leathers were the natural choice. And then as we did research, we picked up the kudu from Africa, which was the main tribal resource, the kangaroo from the rabbit, which was the original Aboriginal resource in Australia. And, for us, these leathers, because they aren't disposable, because they last a lifetime, because they come from proven sustainable resources, we feel like this is basically our conversation, our sustainable conversation about leather.
I think it's amazing, because you just told us a fantastic story about the bison and amber bracelet, but you talk a bit about, on your website, about the storytelling behind each piece, and there is a fantastic example of it. And it seems to be that you're combining two loves, which is the earth and the animals, and kind of making a story out of it, really. So every piece has you have the opportunity to create a story from it. So the leathers obviously comes from sustainable resources, I think you mentioned before. And the stones are really interesting as well, because you even have dinosaur brown dinosaur gemstone. I wrote it down on my notes. And you've got jade, and you've got amber, and you've got lapis lazuli. These are all stones which have very specific meanings as well, don't they? So, and that must add to the story of the bracelets. I mean, it's worth mentioning you do necklaces as well, but yeah, let's keep with the bracelets for now.
Well, the idea there is that excuse me, if you wanted to, so a lot of this is about tradition and history, and you can go back thousands of years, and jewelry started out as practical purposes, in terms of for spiritual reasons, or for protection, or for marking a special occasion or meaning and what have you. And so the materials that they chose were, organic, they were natural, they were what they could find around, but they all had meaning. If you chose this stone, it invoked a certain concept or energy or aspiration. And throughout time, you can see that jade was used for, and associated with abundance and prosperity. And amber is considered to help with alignment and balance because of the purity of the light and the airiness of the stone. So by combining all these natural materials, you can, create symbolic meaning in the individual pieces. And the reason that's important is because I think it's great for storytelling. Like when I meet someone, especially if I'm a little nervous, I just, they usually ask about my bracelets, and then I can point to one and I can tell a little story that just tells a little bit about me and kind of how I view the world and what I'm thinking and how I show up. And I think this invites the other person to then maybe tell you their story. And this is one of the lost arts in, human communities have evolved through storytelling and understanding each other's, concerns and desires, and through this. So I think this is, jewelry is a fantastic way to tell your story. And it's also a great way to create connection. And by having materials that have that deeper meaning behind them, it can be, quite a unique story you put together. And, the idea is that they hopefully have a contemporary modern design with that historical depth of meaning. And that's the kind of combination behind the brand.
But I think that's so important. And actually, I can tell you a story about this. So when I was in Australia, it's actually quite sit down, everybody. So I was getting on a bus, and this guy said, you're a spiritualist or something along those lines. And he said, you're not listening to your ancestors, or, the spirits are saying, be creative, you're not listening. You need to go and buy a stone. So when I was leaving Australia, I went, and this is the only stone I could get in the airport. I think it's blue, but I think it's called a black opal. I don't really know. But anyway, it's called black, but it's blue. And so I got this literally, 10 years ago, and it has not left my neck since then. So it's crazy how these things happen. And I think that in a way, before, I suppose it's when people used to have tattoos to show that they'd fought in a battle, or that they become a man or a woman, or, that they would. So there was always ways to kind of tell a story. And I suppose about the Maoris had the different symbols on the necklaces as well, and definitely on the tattoos, I believe. So this is something that's been
the Maoris actually sorry to interrupt. The Maoris actually have a fascinating, I think it's called a heitiki. And the way you get your heitiki, this green stone that they use, is you go to, and I'm probably getting all the words wrong, but they go to a spirit guide, and the spirit guide finds the stone for you. So there's a very spiritual aspect to the jewelry with the Maori culture and what have you. And that's similar with every other culture. There's meaning and there's story behind it, which I always find fascinating. Like listening to your story, I'm learning about you. And it creates conversation. And now I'm more relaxed and you're more relaxed. And we start sharing stories. And it's just, fashion is great, but I think jewelry is more personal, and jewelry has so much more opportunity in it to be expressive for me. That's just
I think, it's obviously something that you're really passionate about, because you mentioned on your website connection, acceptance, prosperity, and abundance. And I suppose, the way you label the jewelry is that you give people a reason to buy it, for, I think, one for acceptance, or another one for clarity, I believe. And so each stone has kind of a symbol, symbolism, which you're kind of reinventing in a modern way.
Yeah, and it's sort of using those tools, not in an intense way, but in a playful way, that, it's a nice additive to life, and it adds a little bit of color, and it adds a little bit of story and connection. And for me as well, every time I look at these bracelets, I'm reminded of, that love lock on the bridge. I'm reminded of my trip to Africa. I'm reminded of my dog, and these help keep me connected and grounded. So it's kind of like when people say, do stones have properties? Do stones do this? Well, my attitude has always been, if I look at it and I remember that this stone represents this, and that makes me remember that and embody that, then who cares whether it actually has that or not? It serves the purpose. So to me, it's just about that connection to things that are important to you, and a great little reminder on a daily basis of, whatever you want to be reminded of, or whatever you want to feel connected to. And the biggest thing is we make it, excuse me, the idea is that these leathers and all of the materials like the plant fiber, the whole idea is that you never have to take any of the jewelry off. These have not left my wrist in, I don't know, 5-6 years or more, and swimming, showering, everything. And the whole point is that if you have important memories or things, then you want them with you all the time, and they should be durable enough to last. So I got a little off topic there.
No, you're right. And I was going to tell you all about my bracelets on my wrist as well, but we'll leave that.
Well, no, but you see, we could go on for hours about this, and I just find that fun.
Yeah, I think that it tells a lot about you. I think it's maybe something we've forgotten, but I think how you kind of decorate yourself actually tells, as well as the clothes you wear, but it tells a lot about yourself and your history, really. And so the spiritualism is important to you. So when did that start to kind of come into your life?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'd always been curious about other cultures, and I went to school in Japan when I was a kid, and traveled around the world a lot and what have you. And I just was always fascinated by people telling stories. And I was always fascinated to hear new experiences and new things. I'm an information junkie in terms of, I love hearing things that I've never heard about or learning new things. And in particular, I think it has been a gradual process through maybe not so much it was always there, and the curiosity was there. And then it kind of started to develop when I started meditating in my 30s and whatever, and started looking into other stuff. And then through the wolves, I ended up doing some work in the United States with a Native American tribe. Actually, the main reason was I had found an eagle feather war bonnet, an actual one from the late 1800s in France at a museum, at a gallery that was selling them.
And an eagle feather, is that eagle feather?
Like the Native American war bonnets.
Oh, wow.
And I just gravitated towards this for some reason. And so I bought it. I was in investment banking. I bought it. And then over several years, I thought, you know what? I'd really like to find I'd like to find the tribe that this belongs to and give it back to them. So I did. And, by giving that back to them, they sort of brought me into the tribe. And for a year or so, I kind of did sweat lodge ceremonies with them and stuff. And I'd say that was the point where it really solidified, was my early 40s. And it was that really deep experience with them, some incredible experiences during the sweat lodge ceremonies and stuff, that kind of locked it in, I would say. But the curiosity and the interest had always been there.
Well, yeah. And I mean, wolves are very symbolic as well, aren't they, with their connection to the moon, and the moon is very powerful. So I can't think of exactly what they symbolize, but can you tell me? I know they're very important.
The great thing about wolves are, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a great video out there called, I think it's Rewilding of Yellowstone. I'm not sure, but they re-released wolves into Yellowstone. And basically the rivers eventually changed their course because they completely kind of restructured the whole ecosystem back to its original position. So they're kind of like, they represent wisdom and, strength, but they also represent that caretaking nature of an ecosystem. They are the guardians of that ecosystem. And, a lot of the Native American tribes have very strong symbolism with the wolves and connections with the wolves. But a lot of it has to do with that natural balance and natural dynamic the wolf is a keystone piece. And we've actually named the company now Atlas Keystone, because the wolf is a great example of keystone species. It has a massive impact on its entire ecosystem. And without it, the whole ecosystem starts to fall apart. And humans are actually a keystone species because we have a massive impact on our environment. So part of what I want the choice of materials and the symbolism to do or mean is to create a greater connection with the environment that we have and a respect for it and a belief in it, which is very much the way the tribes used to work.
So are sharks their keystone as well?
Yeah, so any apex predator is typically a keystone species. The predator at the top is kind of like, holds the whole pyramid together in a sense. And I think this is something that we've learned in the past decade or more, and realizing that, we have knocked out a lot of the apex predators, and that's having an impact on the different, the same way we knocked out the bison when, the US was kind of colonized, that was a massive base of the ecosystem. So yeah, a lot of this is about, connection to our natural environment and connection to our ecosystem. Like the big thing we do is we give 5% off the top to World Land Trust, and they have a buy an acre program, which is they actually, for every 100 pounds they invest, they buy and permanently protect an entire acre of endangered habitat. And so what I really want business to do, and another purpose of Atlas and my life purpose, I guess, is to create businesses that really have a tangible impact. So every time you buy a piece of jewelry, you have actually saved a 20th or a 10th of an acre. And every time we donate 100, pounds, we are saving an entire acre permanently. And it's that connectivity in the ecosystem. The planet is a stakeholder. It should be treated like your investor. You have to give back to get more. And so it's all about this ecosystem.
And I was just thinking, say in 10 years time and you had to take your bracelet off and it fell on the floor, it wouldn't matter because it's made out of leather and stone, and it's not going to leave any trace. So I suppose
it's all organic, like the plant fiber that we use. It's completely organic.
Yeah. So tell me a bit more about the wolves and tigers. So that experience must have been incredible. So you said that it was kind of partly inspired by giving back this war bonnet to the tribe in North America. But how did it really start?
So basically, when I decided to leave investment banking, I actually thought to myself, okay, you know what? Maybe I should do what I've been passionate about forever, which is animals. And so I'll never forget, I was at my sister's place in Dallas in Texas, and I was buying a little donate to an animal pack with the World Wildlife Fund or something like that. And they had this whole wall of every single animal you could do. And I just immediately went for the wolf. So I started looking at that, and I talked to them, like, how could I get involved? How could I help? Okay, if I'm going to make a career change, what am I going to do? And I talked to these groups. I was living in London, and I talked to these groups in the US, and they said, look, we'd love to have you involved, but you're in the UK. That's not really going to help us much. And one of them introduced me to this guy who had a wolf rescue center in Berkshire, and it's called the UK Wolf Conservation Trust. And so I went over to meet him, and the idea was to kind of get involved and help them raise funds or structure some, plans or something. And when we were up there, we were in the enclosure with several of the wolves that they had. They had about 4 or 5 at the time. And one of them started getting a little rowdy with one of the other visitors. And, I don't know what it was, but I had to grab her and pull her back. And then she kind of turned to growl at me, and I just kind of pinned her down on the ground and put my knee on her. And it was just second nature. I don't know. It was kind of like a big dog. I just thought, it was like no big deal. And I've never had a fear of them for some reason. Okay, obviously in that environment. But so I kind of felt like I realized I had an aptitude or a connection to wolves. And I started working with different conservation groups. And every time they had a difficult wolf, I'd go in the enclosure and the wolf would come right up to me with no problem. So there was something there. And when I did work with the Native Americans, they basically, the shaman I talked to said, like, you were definitely connected to a wolf, that is your spirit guide. Absolutely. And, it was just this innate connection that kind of came out late in life. And so I followed that path for a while as a hobby. And, on weekends was working at different groups in California or here and helping to manage the wolves and helping to let visitors come and have an interaction so we get donations. So that's how that kind of evolved.
I mean, your kind of heritage is just so kind of ingrained, isn't it? It's all kind of come together in Atlas. So what's the company now called? Atlas Keystone.
Well, so the main company is called Atlas Keystone Limited, and
Yeah.
but we keep the trading name Atlas Accessories, which is what I
Yeah.
started with when I first started the company.
Yeah. And how can people find out? Where can they go to find out more about Atlas Accessories?
So Atlas is atlasaccessories.com, and our Instagram is at atlasaccessories.co. And there's a ton of information on there, and yeah.
So, I mean, tell us a bit more, because basically you mentioned you started the company, kind of came up with the idea in 2017, but how long did it take to really get off the ground?
Great question. I have done a lot, I've built a lot of companies, a lot of different industries, and this one was interesting. It's the first time I'd ever done a physical product. We spent probably a year to a year and a half from 2017 through 2018 sourcing the leathers. And, that was really interesting because, you want to buy cow leather, it's everywhere. You want to find bison, not so much. Kudu, again, more difficult. So it was a lot of time to source. Finding the lapidaries as well for the stones, that was tough. That was really tough. But we basically put together our supply network and we made the few prototypes, and that took about a year and a half or so. And there was a big learning curve. And then in early 2019, we launched the website. And so we, first 8-10 months, you test, you do all sorts of stuff. And we were just getting rolling, and we had a fantastic Christmas in 2019. And then boom, pandemic. So it was very interesting. It's been a rough couple years, but yeah.
So what did you learn? What have you learned through kind of the experience?
I think at the end of the day, the hardest thing with jewelry, I find, is because it is so personal, and I want it to be very personal. It's harder to understand your customer, I think, in that sense, because you want to have a deeper relationship that takes a lot of time. So it took a lot longer to build this than I thought it would. And I think that was because I wanted that personal connection, that personal touch. I wanted to be able to get very granular with people. And I didn't realize how long that would take to build that foundation. And the nice thing is that the pandemic, I also learned how to switch to a direct to consumer model really quickly. So that was interesting. But the pandemic almost forced us to slow down our trajectory. And interestingly, that actually allowed us to start communicating with the few customers we had better. So it was almost like a forced slowing down. And that actually, so I'm a big believer that, in chaos is opportunity. If you can just be calm enough to see it and give it a little time, something will always come out of it. So, and the fashion industry is brand new for me. So that was just an entire learning curve. I mean, I've learned a million things basically because I've never done this industry before.
So right now, Atlas Accessories is kind of going well. And where do you see it going in the future?
The big idea is, so I'm kind of Atlas, as you mentioned before, Atlas is very much a culmination of everything I've learned in my life. So there's the passion and the creative and what have you, but also on a business side, I'm a big believer that commerce has power. And if you can really run your company intelligently and not, be a greedy investor or a greedy CEO who's just trying to strip out as much cash as possible, you can really build a very resilient and amazing company that generates enough cash flow to then really give back and make change, like not just buy an acre, buy 1,000 acres every month or something like that. And I also have always loved mentoring younger generations. So the entire company's been built with 20 and 30 somethings. And I'm kind of the old guy in the business. I don't think there's anybody above 35. And, I'm 58. And I really see this as, I want to build a solid jewelry or lifestyle brand that generates enough cash to reinvest that capital in creating a better world. And I want a company that's solid, use my experience and knowledge to build a company that I hand on to the next generation, that they can put their SKU on it, but we've built something really solid using my experience. So I want this to be a company that creates change, that changes people's views of things and actually puts money behind it to do it as well.
I think that's absolutely incredibly admirable. I mean, today on the news, they were talking about I don't know, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was selling all his guitars, or nearly all his guitars, because
Right.
he realized that he could fund loads more training for young people. And it sounds like your company's kind of built in a, I mean, his wasn't, obviously that was a company, but he was a musician, but your
Yeah.
company, Atlas, is built on a similar kind of in a similar way, in the sense you're wanting to give back and enable people to train, and you want it to be a brand which reflects your beliefs and to help the world be better in the future.
Exactly. I think, using commerce, because this is part of our world, and it's fundamental to the human condition and who we are and part of life. So, if you add the planet in as a stakeholder, build that component into your model, that's the way companies should start working. Not, I'm going to create a foundation because I get a ton of tax breaks. It's, I'm going to give 10% off the top, 5% off the top, no creative accounting on net profits or whatever, but I'm going to take a cut right off the top, and we're all going to reinvest that into the world. And that's to me, every company should be able to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, you would advise you need to set it up at the beginning. It's not something that you do when you've got big. It's something you do right from the beginning, and then that becomes part of the whole kind of the feeling of the brand.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my specialty in investment banking and in startups and stuff was ecosystem design. And the idea is, if you build a company that truly is, if your company is at the center of that ecosystem, the health of that ecosystem, then the stronger you make that whole ecosystem, the stronger your business is. So if I include the planet, I mean, we're so tiny, our impact is small, but if everybody starts viewing it as, if we include the planet as part of our ecosystem that we have to give to or take care of, then I'm going to get more back from that. The consumers are going to love that we're doing that because we're creating a better world for them. They're going to buy more of our products. And a lot of this is about, how much money do you need? Do you need $50 million, or do you take 15, have a fantastic life, and put 25 or whatever back into the planet? That's then going to make your company go from X amount to the next amount. So it's creating these, ecosystems that have perfectly balanced exchanges and respect the value creation and the value input. And I think that creates a healthier business. It creates a healthier world. It creates happier people. I don't know. I think that's just kind of my perspective.
Actually, my mind's just been blown, because I've also just realized that eco means economy, but it also means the environment. But I don't mean that. Isn't it ecology? I don't know, ecology and economy, whatever. But it kind of almost has a similar meaning. So by combining the two together, you can create something that's going to really benefit everybody and everything. Gregory, thank you so much for talking to me today. So I'll put the links in to Atlas accessories in the comments as well underneath this. And I must say, you helped me a lot with my little dog Rudy. We did have some fun helping me get her off the lead for the first time, so I really benefit from that. Yeah, thank you very much, Gregory. Take care and see you soon.
Thanks, Georgina. Bye.